All right, let's just jump right in. We all know we're in a climate crisis, and, let's be honest, cutting emissions just isn't happening fast enough. So, this raises a huge question. What if we could take matters into our own hands? What if we could literally create a sunscreen for the entire planet? That's what we're talking about today. It's called solar geoengineering, a super radical idea to cool the Earth, and we're going to look at what it could mean for one of the most vulnerable places in the world, India.
To really get why anyone's even thinking about such a wild idea, you have to start with a number like this one, over 24,000. That's how many people died in India from heat waves between 1992 and 2015. So right off the bat, this isn't just about feeling a little too hot. This is truly a matter of life and death.
And it's a problem that's only getting worse fast. Heat waves all across India, they're becoming more common, way more intense, and they're sticking around for longer. We're at a point where some areas, particularly in the Indo-Gangetic Plains, are facing temperatures that are literally beyond what the human body can handle. The country is, you could say, reaching its climate boiling point.
And what exactly is a heat wave in India? I think this is pretty fascinating. The official definition from their meteorological department shows it's not just one scorcher of a day. No, it's a sustained period of extreme heat. It's a relentless attack that pushes everything, our infrastructure, our farms, and our own bodies right to the breaking point.
But it's not just about the heat, right? You look to the north of India, at the Himalayas. People call them the third pole for a reason. They're this massive reservoir of fresh water for hundreds of millions of people. And as this quote spells out, they're melting away at a rate we've never seen before. That threatens the water supply for the entire subcontinent.
So you've got these deadly heat waves, you've got your water towers literally melting. It's no surprise the question gets a little desperate. If we can't cut greenhouse gases fast enough, can we do something else? Can we intervene? Can we actually hack the planet's climate to buy ourselves some time? And this is exactly where that controversial idea of solar geoengineering enters the picture.
So what is it? The main idea is a group of technologies called solar radiation modification, or SRM. And the concept, at its core, is pretty simple. Find a way to reflect a small amount of sunlight back into space before it has a chance to warm us up. Now, the method that's gotten the most attention is something called stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI for short. We're literally talking about putting a thin layer of tiny, reflective particles way up in the atmosphere to act as a giant planetary sunshade. So how would that even work? Well, the idea actually comes from nature. Remember the huge eruption of Mount Pinatubo back in '91? It blasted a ton of sulfates into the stratosphere. And you know what happened? It cooled the entire planet for more than a year. SAI is basically trying to copy that effect, but, on purpose and all the time, using a fleet of special high-altitude planes.
Okay, so global cooling sounds pretty good, right? But the reality, well, it's way more complicated. The potential side effects in different regions are full of scary unknowns. And for a country like India, with its incredibly complex climate, this whole idea is a massive high-stakes gamble.
And the first thing you have to ask is, what about the monsoon? Those yearly rains are everything for India. They are the absolute lifeblood of its farms and its economy. They feed over 1 billion people. So what happens when you start messing with the global thermostat that controls that pattern?
This is the core of the problem. Climate models are suggesting that, yeah, SAI might cool the subcontinent down, but it could also weaken the very engine that powers the monsoon. It messes with temperature differences, which could then smother the process that creates rain, leading to what scientists call a dry bias. Put simply, it could mean serious droughts across huge parts of India.
And that creates this huge paradox for farming in India. I mean, on the one hand, less extreme heat would be amazing for crops like wheat and rice. But on the other hand, dimming the sun means less direct, powerful sunlight, which is exactly what other really important crops like maize and sugarcane need to thrive. The trade-offs are just brutal. Take groundnuts, a vital crop for millions of small farmers. Some studies predict their harvest could drop by as much as 20%. Oof.
Okay, so what about those melting glaciers we talked about? Well, geoengineering seems to help, but it is not a silver bullet. Not even close. This chart shows a future with really high emissions where the Himalayas lose about 70% of their ice. Geoengineering could cut that loss roughly in half. Now, that's a big deal for sure, but it doesn't stop the melting. It just slows it down.
So we've talked about the risks for India specifically, but now we have to zoom out because there is one massive global risk that kind of overshadows everything else, a risk that would impact every single one of us on this planet.
Just think about this for a second. Geoengineering doesn't actually get rid of CO2. It just puts a mask on the warming it causes. So what happens if that program, which has been running for decades, suddenly stops? Maybe because of a war or an economic collapse or just political fighting. What happens then?
Well, what happens is something scientists have a name for: termination shock. All that warming that was being hidden by our sunshade would come roaring back, and not over 100 years, but in just a decade or two. It would be a thermal shock to the planet unlike anything we have ever seen.
Let that number sink in. A warming rate 5 to 20 times faster than the already crazy fast climate change we're struggling with right now. There's just no way to adapt to that. Ecosystems would completely collapse. Agriculture would fail. It would be a catastrophe on a scale that's, well, it's hard to even wrap your head around. It's a cliff-edge scenario for humanity.
And that brings us to maybe the biggest problem of all. Who's in charge? Who gets to decide to do this, and what temperature do we aim for? If one country starts this and it causes a drought on another, is that an act of war? To make this work, you'd need perfect, stable international cooperation for centuries. It's a geopolitical minefield.
Look, at the end of the day, solar geoengineering seems to offer this temptingly simple fix for an incredibly complex problem. But it comes with these massive risks for places like India and the absolutely terrifying global risk of a termination shock. So it leaves us all with this final, really unsettling question for our time. Who, if anyone, should get their hands on the world's thermostat?